Upgrade your sleep with the award-winning Pod 4 Ultra by 8 Sleep, a smart mattress cover that fits easily over your existing mattress with adjustable temperature settings ranging from 55 to 110 degrees. You and your partner can each enjoy customized comfort on your own side of the bed. I keep mine at 60 to stay cool throughout the night. It even includes smart technology to adjust your mattress position, help reduce snoring. Plus, you'll have 30 days to see if it's the right fit for you. Visit 8sleep.com/Pacman and enter code Pacman for $350 off. The link is in the description. Welcome to the show, everybody. Just 1 week remains before this major election. Later this week, we will be looking at House projections. We will be looking at House projections and Senate projections and so much more. But one of the really interesting sort of new stories that cropped up virtually out of thin air on Sunday at Donald Trump's Nazi-style rally at Madison Square Garden is the issue of the Puerto Rican population, Puerto Rican voters here in the mainland United States, and specifically what this might mean for the election. We're going to get to that all a little bit later in the show, but I want to start with something that, sometimes you just don't know where looking around will take you. And one of the things that has surfaced over the last couple of days, as many of us have sought to answer the question, who the hell thought it was a good idea to have comedian Tony Hinchcliffe tell jokes before the Trump rally? The answer that some of us have found is, it seems like Joe Rogan thought it was a good idea, and that may even be where Trump got this idea in the first place. So let me remind you, before Donald Trump spoke on Sunday evening in New York City, Tony Hinchcliffe, the comedian, who I've said before, I didn't have any issue with previously. I thought he was excellent in the roast of Tom Brady. And when he's punching up and going at celebrities and athletes, his roasts are good. This felt mean, this felt vindictive, and it felt xenophobic at the end of the day. Here are the comments from Sunday's rally, which have generated so much controversy.
A lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
Okay, so even the bloodthirsty and crazed Madison Square Garden crowd did not exactly feel titillated by calling Puerto Rico a heaping mound of garbage in the ocean. So, of course, after this all happened, Trump's campaign and Republicans generally started rushing to do damage control. Rick Scott, who is running in Florida, which, if not a large Puerto Rican population, has a large Latino population, immediately said, this wasn't funny, this wasn't good. Puerto Ricans are great people, Latinos are great people. The Trump campaign put out a statement saying that Donald Trump does not agree with, or that Tony Hinchcliffe's comment about Puerto Rico does not represent Trump's views. Some on Fox News defended it as just jokes. The usual suspects on Twitter have been saying, if you're offended by this, you simply have no sense of humor and you're a tone policer and blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the operational questions that came up is, how did Tony Hinchcliffe find himself speaking at a Trump rally to begin with? And the answer might be that Trump or someone working for him, more likely, heard what Joe Rogan said about specifically Trump getting Tony Hinchcliffe to give him or to say things. Check out this clip that's been unearthed.
It would behoove him to hire a few great comics to just tour with him and just write one-liners about all these different fucking people.
I mean,
if he could remember them, I know he likes to go off his own head, but
Sure.
if he could remember a few Hinchcliffe bangers, if he hires Hinchcliffe to take him on the road, do you know how fucking insane that would be?
Yeah, dude.
Hinchcliffe writing bangers for Trump to shit on people. Trump was smart. He would hire Shane and Tony Hinchcliffe.
There you go. So Joe Rogan, thinking it would be some kind of brilliant idea to bring in Tony Hinchcliffe to write one-liners, quote, to shit on people. It turns out that he did do that, except it was Puerto Ricans. It wasn't radical socialists, which is considered politically acceptable if you're on the MAGA right. You say, oh, radical socialist, this and that. It wasn't, I don't know, celebrities from Hollywood who support Kamala Harris. It was just Puerto Ricans. And it is now a major and massive problem for the Trump campaign. Now, later in the show, we're going to dig into in more detail something which we spoke about a little bit on yesterday's bonus show.
Oh, the bonus show where you want to make money.
Yes.
Everybody else that makes money to fund themselves is bad.
We made money on the bonus show yesterday while talking about the fact that after New York and Florida, two states whose results are not really in question, the leading states in terms of Puerto Rican population include Pennsylvania, a state which could be the deciding state in next Tuesday's presidential election. So this Hinchcliffe thing, it actually could cost Trump the election. And it might be Joe Rogan that Trump will have to thank for that. Let's come back to that a little bit later. Kamala Harris is now challenging Donald Trump to a cognitive test. This is poetically perfect. It's not Kafkaesque as much of what Trump does is. This is actually perfect. Now, we are 7 days from this election. We are, as much as I would love to see it, we are not going to see both candidates sitting down to be tested for dementia or receiving cognitive or IQ tests. But I would love to see it. And what's absolutely spot on about Kamala Harris now starting to say we should do a cognitive test is that to the naked eye, even to an unsophisticated rube as myself, when I hear Donald Trump speak and I hear Kamala Harris speak, it's very obvious who is fully in command of their cognitive faculties. And it's not the oldest ever presidential candidate, presidential major party nominee, Donald Trump. It's Kamala Harris. So here is video of Kamala Harris during a CBS Mornings interview saying, listen, Trump wants cognitive tests. Let's do it. We should absolutely do it.
Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan, and he called you, Madam Vice President, a very low IQ person and said, I think she needs to take a cognitive test. I think Kamala should have a test because there's something missing. There's something wrong with her. Would you take a cognitive test?
Sure. I would challenge him to take the same one. But here's the thing. This is what he has resorted to, and I think he actually is increasingly unstable and unhinged, and has resorted to name calling because he actually has no plan for the American people. But on the point of why Donald Trump is unfit to be president of the United States, don't take it from me. Listen to the people who know him best. His former chiefs of staff, most recently, 4-star Marine General John Kelly. Listen to 2 former secretaries of defense who worked for him. Listen to his national security advisor. Listen to his vice president, who have all, in one way or another, said he is unfit to be president again, should never be president again, and is dangerous. It has become clear from the people who know him best, all Republicans, by the way, who served with him in the Oval Office and the Situation Room, not to mention Donald Trump's own words.
So listen, there is one candidate in this presidential race who very obviously does not suffer from cognitive decline, and it's Kamala Harris. Now, later, we are going to do a deep dive. This is really good stuff. We're going to do a deep dive later on a linguistic analysis that was done of Trump's speech, Biden's speech, and Harris's speech, looking for decline. And I will give you the results. I don't think they will surprise you. I want to say just one other word about the whole cognitive test format. Donald Trump insists that, what was it now, 4 years ago, he passed a cognitive test with flying colors. That was the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And what many neurologists have said since is that that's a test for relatively advanced cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, and that much of what Trump seems to be suffering from would not really be covered by that test. There are other tests that could be done and might be better. Now, I'm going to give you a list of them. I'm not saying all of these would be better, but the point is there are many other tests. There's the mini mental state examination. There's Addenbrook's cognitive examination, the St. Louis mental status examination, the cognitive abilities screening instrument, the trail making test, the neuropsychological test batteries, the Hopkins verbal learning test. I could go on. The point here is what Trump seems to be suffering from that is picked up when you do a linguistic analysis might not be reflected in the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, but these other tests would likely pick it up. In addition to this, Trump took the Montreal Cognitive Assessment 4 to 5 years ago. I don't know what would happen if he took it again. 4 to 5 years is not an insignificant amount of time. And it would be interesting, if nothing else, to have Trump take that test again. Will they be tested between now and next Tuesday? They will not. Now, a nice bonus clip from this same interview that Kamala Harris did. Kamala Harris talking about Trump and the people around him increasingly pointing to him as having problems. I believe that this is not the exact same response that we just listened to. Let's double check that.
And said, I think she needs to take a cognitive test.
It is exactly the same clip. So we already listened to it. I could play the same clip for you back to back. It would be a little Trumpian of me to just like completely forget that I just played this clip. It's the same clip. That's an error, and I'm correcting it on the fly. So Kamala Harris making a very good point here, which is you don't just need to listen to liberal pundits or pundents, as many of them wrongly say. I still don't know why. Pundits talking about fentanyl. Even the people around Trump recognize the danger that he represents, whether it's Caroline Matthews, whether it's Cassidy Hutchinson, John Kelly. You know, you can find people from within or outside the military, male or female, younger and older, every demographic covered in those who used to work for Trump and don't believe him to be fit. So we will see ultimately what the country decides. I wish we had that cognitive test coming. We don't. We'll just have to vote. Experience better sleep with the Pod 4 Ultra by 8 Sleep, one of today's sponsors. The Pod 4 Ultra is a smart mattress cover that fits easily over your existing mattress to regulate temperature throughout the night. You can choose a setting anywhere from 55 to 110 degrees. I like 60. I don't like getting hot when I sleep, and it makes a huge difference. If you share your bed, each side can be independently controlled. You have one temperature, your partner has another. The pod will also monitor your sleep and check out the patterns of sleep to automatically adjust the temperature to optimize rest. Snoring is no problem. The pod can gently elevate your head to reduce snoring when detected, leading to a better night's sleep for you and your partner. You can try the Pod 4 Ultra, 30 nights with no risk. If it's not a good fit, send it back. My guess is you'll try it and want to keep it. Go to 8sleep.com/Pacman. Use the code Pacman for $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. At this critical moment for American democracy, progressive independent media is arguably as important as ever. We are directly supported by our audience, and I encourage you to sign up and become a member at joinpacman.com. Donald Trump may have made a fatal mistake in Pennsylvania by having Tony Hinchcliffe at Madison Square Garden say that Puerto Rico is a floating pile of garbage in the ocean. Why do I say this? Well, we're starting to do the math and learning about the disastrous fallout among Latino voters and specifically Puerto Rican voters in the United States. Let's back up a little bit. One of the states that is most likely to be the sole decider of this election, if the election were to come down to just one state, is the state of Pennsylvania. It just so happens that Pennsylvania also has one of the largest Puerto Rican populations, especially among the states that could decide the election. So let's talk it through, looking at this map from Newsweek. Florida has 1.2 million Puerto Rican people living within it. But most likely, Florida is gone to Trump. Now, we never give up on any state and we fight for everything, but we're being realistic here. And it does seem as though Florida has in presidential elections recently taken a decidedly red turn. More than likely, Kamala Harris's win is not going to depend on winning Florida. Similarly, in New York, there are nearly 1.1 million Puerto Ricans. And similarly, Trump is not going to win New York. Trump is lying and saying we might win New York and New Jersey, but he is not going to. The election will not depend on New York. The election will not depend on New Jersey, which has nearly 500,000 Puerto Ricans. Kamala Harris is going to win that. Massachusetts has 330,000 Puerto Ricans. Massachusetts is going to go to Harris. So then you get to this state of Pennsylvania. Nearly 4% of the Pennsylvanian population is Puerto Rican. That's nearly 500,000 people. And what we are now starting to see, as Politico reports, is that Trump's Puerto Rico fallout is, quote, spreading like wildfire in Pennsylvania. And this article outlines and argues that Donald Trump, quote, has a serious Puerto Rico problem in Pennsylvania. Now, the first question we would ask in such a scenario would be, okay, Tony Hinchcliffe said that thing, but do Puerto Ricans care? Is it affecting Trump? Is anyone attaching it to Trump? The answer is yes. Widespread condemnation from within the Puerto Rican community. Very few Puerto Ricans writing this off as just a silly joke, and I'm still voting for Scrumps. No, that's not happening. It seems as though, rightly so, this was seen particularly in the context of Trump seemingly not caring about Puerto Rico, kind of making fun of the entire recovery effort by showing up after a hurricane and shooting paper towels like basketball free throws into a crowd, talking about withholding aid, drawing on hurricane maps. He's just never seemed super concerned about Puerto Rico. At one point, reportedly, not even realizing that it's part of the United States, thinking that he was going to talk to the president of Puerto Rico, which, by the way, was him at the time. So in the context of Trump being indifferent or even negligent towards Puerto Rico, combined with the comments from Tony Hinchcliffe, Puerto Rican voters are not happy. We then get to the numbers. If you go back to the 2020 presidential election, you see that in Pennsylvania, the margin of victory for Joe Biden was only 81,000 votes. If you believe the story that Donald Trump has been making inroads with Latino voters, and by the way, when I say if you believe it, I believe it. The polling I've seen does not show Trump making inroads with black voters, but it does show Trump as of 3 days ago, right? We'll see how the numbers change. The polling does show Trump nationally doing better among Latino voters than he did in 2020. So if you believe that, and you see that there's nearly 500,000 Puerto Rican voters in Pennsylvania, and you see that Trump only lost it by 80,000 votes in 2020, you could certainly imagine a world in which, heroically riding on the backs of Latino voters, Donald Trump surges to victory in Pennsylvania and subsequently wins the election because of Pennsylvania, which that's all a plausible scenario. On the other hand, thanks to Joe Rogan's brilliant idea some time ago that Tony Hinchcliffe should go around with Trump writing one-liners and delivering one-liners, and you see that Tony Hinchcliffe did that, and it has disgusted Puerto Rican voters, and there's 500,000 of them in Pennsylvania. It could be that Donald Trump will lose Pennsylvania and thus lose the election thanks to the Tony Hinchcliffe Puerto Rico disaster at Madison Square Garden Sunday evening. That's the math of it. We'll follow it, and ultimately we will know the answer. A soaking wet Donald Trump nuked himself last night in Atlanta, having a complete and total swollen and sweaty orange meltdown. Wow. 8 days yesterday before the election, and Trump is standing around to music looking swollen and sweaty as sycophants lose their minds.
To the hills of Tennessee.
Right.
Across the plains of Texas.
Now, you might notice that Trump's face is orange, but his ears and neck are a pale pink. That's his choice. And I'm fine with anyone using any makeup they want. They should do it. You know, we used to say, oh, J.D. Vance wears women's makeup. It's just makeup. Why is it only reserved for women? Let Trump do whatever he wants. The problem is that either the things that he puts on his face or the things that come out of his mouth are really diminishing the number of people going to these rallies. And in fact, the crowd size yesterday in Atlanta, a critical battleground state, pretty damn weak. Here is Trump speaking, and as you can see, a very light turnout, significant areas of just empty bleachers, rows of bleachers empty. And part of it is, of course, what Donald Trump is offering at these rallies. Donald Trump dismissed all of the Nazi stuff floating around him because he recreated a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden with an anecdote about his father. Unfortunately, I think this anecdote actually causes more problems for Trump.
Kamala is now doing something much worse than what she was talking about. The newest line from Kamala and her campaign is that everyone who isn't voting for her is a Nazi. We're Nazis.
Of course, that's not the claim.
You know, years ago, my father, I had a great father, he's a tough guy. He used to always say, never use the word Nazi, never use that word. You don't ever use the word Nazi. And, you know, it's incredible now. The way they talk is so disgusting and just horrible the way they...
You know, it's funny that Trump brings up his dad. Trump's dad was arrested at a KKK rally in the 1920s and was involved with the John Birch Society. And so when I think about under what circumstances might Fred Trump have been telling Donald Trump never use the word Nazi, I wonder if it's not because it's a bad thing to call others, but it's because of self-preservation concerns and not wanting the word attached to their own family. In any case, there's no way to know at this point in time. Donald Trump raised the claim that we have an occupied nation in the United States. The towns, the cities, the villages, it's all been invaded and conquered, almost like a Middle Ages sort of situation. It's news to people in Scarsdale, New York, right? But it's another attempt to get the crowd wound up with fear of the other.
Of our country, the United States is now an occupied country.
Is it?
But it will soon be an occupied country no longer.
Oh boy.
November 5th, 2024 will be Liberation Day in America. And on day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. We're going to get these criminals out.
So listen to the specific words that Trump is using. Invaded, conquered, occupied, liberation. These are military terms which Trump is using to prime the pump for violent action. Oh, his supporters are getting violent again at the polls or on January 6, 2025? Well, listen, we were conquered, we were occupied, we were invaded, and now we are simply patriotically trying to be liberated. This is how you manufacture consent, or at least indifference, to horrible anti-democratic authoritarian insanity. Trump, as usual, struggling with his memory, saying we're close to World War II, and someone in the crowd actually corrects him. This is interesting.
But we're close to World War II because we have people in the White House that World War III. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I had World War II. I had World War II. I had World War II veterans. I didn't realize the word veteran afterwards. Thank you.
There you go. So Trump confused by the teleprompter. I don't even know that I believe that explanation. He, of course, says he doesn't need the teleprompter, yet he uses it, and he's so sucked into it that he says completely false things. fomenting the authoritarian fervor in the room, Trump says, you know, if he wanted to, he could have locked up Hillary.
They said, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. They scream, I'd say, easy, easy, we won. We're going to have unity. I could have locked her up. But
Really?
I didn't want to lock her up. She's the wife of the President of the United States previously, and she was Secretary of State. I said, that would be so terrible for our country. And then they try and do it to me.
One little difference there, something called evidence of crimes that separated Trump from Hillary, and then completely beyond parody, moments after reading things incorrectly off of the teleprompter, Donald Trump brags that he doesn't need a teleprompter. He is using a teleprompter while he says this.
And isn't it great to have a guy that doesn't need to look at a teleprompter at all, right? I don't need to.
Trump said this while flanked by teleprompters. Finally, as the rally started to reach its climax and denouement, Trump turned his ire to Michelle Obama, saying that she's getting nasty with him. Nasty. A term he mostly applies only to women.
With your support on November 5th, you know what's nasty to me? Michelle Obama. Obama. Ooh. I always tried to be so nice and respectful. Oh, she opened up a little bit of a box. She opened up a little bit of something. Oh, she was nasty.
Michelle Obama famously opening up a box, and then finally Donald Trump going from talking about Michelle Obama to talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and as is often the case, Trump confused, I guess, about how a hydrogen-powered vehicle would work. You all know anytime Trump touches science, it gets dicey quick.
You're not recognizable if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong and Marjorie Taylor Greene with that beautiful blonde hair is driving down the highway in a hydrogen car, and the problem with a hydrogen car, if something goes wrong, it's like the atom bomb went off. You're not recognizable. But they say, we think we have it under control. That's not good enough. They'll say, we thought it was Marjorie Taylor Greene riding down the middle of the turnpike, but she's no longer recognizable.
Yeah, so not a particularly exciting rally, but for the most part, people stayed in the room for the rally. Very different from what happened in Pennsylvania. At a rally in State College, Pennsylvania, the crowd emptying out as Donald Trump spoke, and this is now a feature of almost every rally. Yesterday in Atlanta, Trump managed to keep the people in the room. We don't know if they just lock the doors. That's a joke, by the way. I'm not actually suggesting they lock the doors, although they might have, because that did happen once at Mar-a-Lago. But in State College, Pennsylvania, the crowd emptying out and sitting in basically silence for much of this rally. As you can see here in the video, large swaths half empty or even more, and the crowd just not engaged. Here is the area behind Donald Trump at 6:28 p.m., as you can see, relatively full. And then just a little while later, in fact, to be exact, 24 minutes later, extremely empty. Now recall that Trump says no one leaves his rallies. Remember when he was triggered by Kamala Harris during their debate, where she said, I encourage people to go and check out a rally of his. They're boring and people leave early. And Trump said, no, but nobody leaves my rallies early. And of course, they are leaving almost every rally early. Donald Trump broaching at this event one of the most disgusting lies that he's come up with, and maybe he didn't even come up with it. Maybe someone came up with it for him, which is that there are children forcibly getting gender reassignment surgery or gender affirming care. I apologize. I don't always know exactly what the approved terminology is that used to be called sex change, sex reassignment, gender affirming care. Trump says people get those operations with no consent from their parents. Children do.
She thinks operations are wonderful. To transition a man to a woman is a wonderful thing. And without parental consent yet, this is a wonderful thing. Now, if she believed that even for a day, you don't want to have her because it's in there somewhere deep inside, right?
Yeah,
She thinks
of course, this is not happening. Trump tells an even more extreme version of the story where he says, nice little boy goes to school one day, next day comes home and is a girl, and it's brutal what they're doing to these kids without any parental consent, which is another classic Trump glitch. It's not happening. It's been investigated. It's wild that it even had to be investigated. It simply isn't happening. Trump's attention limitations plaguing him during this rally. He got distracted from his teleprompter, which he doesn't need, to talk about his hair.
I'm just looking at my hair. I don't like it. I should have been looking a little left. No, I started looking at my hair. It's a Dowdy.
Dowdy, yeah. I like that one. Dowdy, yeah. It's like barappa deep oop ah.
Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat.
Yeah, repeat dude. Okay, and then finally, Donald Trump doing something that Republicans never used to do. It used to be, I may not like the leaders. I may not like the president. David, I may not like your hair. But America is always good. But that has changed. And now it's America's bad when a Democrat is president.
I said something yesterday. I thought it was terrible. And then I realized it was actually good. First time I ever said it. We become like a garbage can for the rest of the world.
Oof.
They're throwing all their garbage into our country. And we're not taking it. And they know we're not taking it. They don't want me to win this election, that I can tell you.
And understand that when Trump says we are the garbage can, he doesn't mean for his dozen Diet Pepsi cans a day. That's not what he means. He doesn't mean a garbage can where we put the Trump shoes and the Trump steaks and the Trump water and the Trump universe. No. He means a garbage can for people. The people that are garbage, that are sent here, he says, from the rest of the world. That's what he says we are a garbage can for. Disgusting stuff. Folks, make sure that you have pre-ordered my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine. I am now in the middle of recording the audiobook. I hope someone buys this damn thing because the audiobook recording is brutal. I knew it would be a slog to read the entire book and go back and, you popped a P there and go back a sentence. It is absolutely brutal. So I hope that somebody actually likes it. I think it's coming out great. It's a lot of work. DavidPakman.com/echo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Audible. Call any local bookstore. Tell them you want The Echo Machine by David Pakman. They will get it for you. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. Well, it is no longer a matter of opinion. An empirical scientific analysis has found that Donald Trump is suffering from cognitive decline. Whether he can't be president, whether you like it, whether Biden is also suffering, those are all fair questions. But we now have the data. Trump's brain has declined. The 2024 election is a week away, and both age and cognitive ability play a major role this election cycle. This was going to be an election between 81-year-old Joe Biden and 78-year-old Donald Trump, in an environment where the American people said they were craving younger leadership. Following a disastrous debate performance in June where he seemed tired and confused, losing his train of thought, Joe Biden ultimately stepped aside, with the now 60-year-old Kamala Harris replacing him as the Democratic nominee. Now, with Biden no longer in the race, we have Kamala Harris facing the oldest, major party presidential nominee in American history. That's Donald Trump, who has been experiencing very obvious cognitive decline, something that we've been following on the show for years, but has really only been recently receiving the attention it deserves from the corporate news media. The reality is that some level of cognitive decline is quite common in people into their 70s and 80s, so it's not a surprise that we would witness it in political candidates who happen to be that old. However, it's often what is called subclinical, often not materially relevant to one's ability to make decisions or to reason appropriately. But much of this is just conjecture. It's our instinct when we watch or listen to Trump, and something a little more quantitative would be nice, and that's what we now have. Researchers have quantified the cognitive performances of Biden, Harris, and Trump through an analysis of what they've said during debates over the last few years. This is very interesting. Researchers affiliated with the University of Southern California did a study on cognitive performance and linguistic analysis. And what they did is use an advanced language model named Claude Opus 3.5 to identify and analyze the linguistic markers of the different candidates. Now, I'll say a little more later about non-linguistic analyses about cognitive decline, but one very powerful tool in evaluating cognitive decline is how people speak, and more importantly, how their speech has changed over time. What the researchers did is identify 7 key linguistic markers that can potentially signal cognitive decline, and these include lexical diversity, which just means how varied are the words that you use when you speak. Syntactic complexity, meaning how sophisticated is your sentence structure. Mean sentence length, that just means on average how many words are in your sentences. And they looked at the use of complex clausal structures, that means sentences that have multiple clauses or ideas in them. And the study looked at the frequency of semantically imprecise lexemes, or words that lack clear meaning. You use a word and it's not really clear what you mean by it, as well as the repetition of lexical items or phrases, which when you repeat the same thing over and over again when you speak, and when you increasingly do that over time, it suggests that you're struggling to express your thoughts and kind of filling it with some small number of words you're comfortable with. And finally, the study looked at the prevalence of grammatical aberrations or errors in grammar as well. So this was evaluated over time, and the idea was, let's get some insight over the cognitive functioning, not at one point in time, but as something that changes, ebbs and flows over time. The researchers did this by using transcripts of presidential and vice presidential debates over the last 5 years. What was the reason to do this? Well, if you're looking at teleprompter speeches, you're not getting a natural reflection of how one speaks, the vocabulary they use, etc., because they're just reading a prepared speech. It wouldn't really give us information. So the idea here was, let's look at the recent Trump-Biden debate and their 2020 debates. Let's look at the Harris-Trump debate. Let's look at pivotal debates from previous election cycles. And with this unscripted vocabulary and linguistic analysis, we can get a sense of what is the natural pattern and the way that speech has changed over time. Once the transcripts were collected, the analysis began. To try to reduce bias, the transcripts were anonymized. So it wasn't, hey, analyze this Trump transcript. The idea was, let's do an objective evaluation by anonymizing the transcripts. The candidates' performances were analyzed using this language model. Each candidate was scored on the linguistic markers that I mentioned. Scores went from 1 to 100, and this was done multiple times to ensure reliability. The results were averaged to try to minimize outliers and discrepancies. And interestingly, the study found only minor score differences between runs. So there was like a consistent reproducibility here. So let's now get to the revelations. Revelation number 1 is that it is true that Joe Biden, now 81 years old, showed notable decline in performance from 2012 to 2020, with a decrease in 6.5% per year. 6.5% total, about 0.8% per year in linguistic performance. This was visible to the naked eye, right? I've said many times, watch Biden's debate against Paul Ryan back in 2012, watch Biden's debates against Trump in 2020, and watch Biden's debate against Trump in 2024. Notable, and the analysis of the language found the same thing. Now, even more concerning, Biden's rate of decline appeared to accelerate from 2020 to 2024 with a decrease of 22%, about 6% per year during that period. So what this suggests is that there was something to the concerns about Biden and cognition, and that it arguably made a lot of sense to replace Biden with someone younger at the top of the ticket. So that's Biden. Let's now go to Trump. Trump, who remains in the race at age 78, the oldest major party nominee for president in the history of the United States, Trump displayed steady decline from 2016 until 2024. Okay? His performance declined 6% from 16 to 20. That's about 1.4% per year, more than Biden. And from 2020 to 2024, about 2.2% per year. So there's been an acceleration in Trump's decline, including just over the last 4 months, where Trump's score dropped 10% in just a few months. This is massive. And again, what's fascinating about this is that even though most of us aren't linguists, cunning or otherwise, amateur, right? Cunning linguist, amateur linguist, well, most of us are not linguists. Just by listening to Trump, we notice, especially lately, that something is wrong. And the linguistic analysis done with this language model found that indeed Trump has been declining, and he's been declining more acutely, precipitously over the last several months. The analysis also found that Trump's linguistic efficacy was lower to begin with, meaning Trump started off in a worse state, whereas Biden used to have a score of nearly 600. Trump started around 400. So Trump, at some core level, has a diminished linguistic ability, and this is why we end up saying that he speaks at a 4th grade level during speeches. So Trump's decline more rapid than Biden's, ending at a lower point and starting at a more diminished value. Now, let's be thorough, and we'll also talk about Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is 60 years old. She's notably younger than the other two. And maybe not surprisingly, Harris had the most stability among the 3 candidates and the least decline. Kamala Harris showed such minor decline that it could actually just be sort of statistical noise. Harris's linguistic scoring declined 0.4% per year since 2020. And that could be reflective more of even cultural expectations of how candidates speak rather than any material decline. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Over the last 4 years, political discourse has coarsened, and the standards and expectations of how our elected officials will speak has degraded. And so when you see such a small decline in Harris, it might just reflect that culturally, we now expect candidates to talk a certain way. It's such a small amount. So bottom line, we can show you the trend lines now. And as you can see, Kamala Harris has effectively no change. Biden and Trump have both experienced notable declines in linguistic abilities. Now, let me give you the caveats and the limits of this analysis. These figures are valuable insights, but we should approach them with some caution, because the scores that we get from this linguistic analysis, number one, are estimates. They stem from large language model assessments, which have limitations in precision. There's no doubt about it. This study focused on communication ability. That's only one aspect of cognitive decline. Cognitive decline can also manifest in other ways: memory function, executive control, the speed of information processing. Those would be other analyses. Anecdotally, we see Trump having major issues with memory, And you could imagine a situation where someone's communication abilities and verbal abilities might decline, but it might not reflect a decline cognitively. It often does, but it wouldn't necessarily. You could have some kind of issue which affects speech, but not cognition. The criticisms that Joe Biden received for his 2024 debate performance went beyond speaking ability. They had to do with energy. They had to do with that constant coughing into his hand, sounding tired, the gaze that he sometimes had. So there's no doubt that there are other things here. But one aspect of this is very clear. If you are someone who didn't want to vote for Biden because you were concerned about his age and you were concerned about his cognitive ability, you should be equally, if not more, concerned about Donald Trump's cognitive ability. And there is now only one candidate in the race who has proven herself to be cognitively up to the task at hand. Her name is Kamala Harris. So now I'm ready. Tell me all the reasons why the analysis is right when it comes to Biden, but wrong with Trump. I'm ready for the Magats and the Magapotamians and the Magadonians to explain it all to me. Read the analysis. We're linking to the study. Look through it. And then be specific. This reminds me, I'm anticipating that this will be like when I did my segment about how the stock market does better under Democrats, inflation's lower, job creation higher, GDP growth higher. And people just write to me and they go, you must be blind to think that that's the case. It's not really an argument. Maybe try presenting some data. Give me some empirical analysis of what I'm saying. So I'm ready for the non-empirical reactions to what I'm telling you here today. Maybe this impacts your vote. Maybe it doesn't. But there is no doubt that we now have a significant cognitive difference between Trump and Kamala Harris. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. The Constitution of the United States. What is it? How does it work? When do we ignore it? Well, we know one time we ignore it, according to Donald Trump, is if he believes it needs to be suspended for the good of the country as he determines. He says that's okay. Apparently, another time that the Constitution can be suspended is when J.D. Vance wants to make some kind of political point. J.D. Vance asked by a reporter during an event in Wausau, Wisconsin. Wausau. Oh boy. He was asked, Trump wants to criminalize flag burning. What do you think about that? JD does not exactly exhibit a profile in courage here defending the Constitution. He says, well, there is something important about protecting the flag.
Senator Torian Small with CBS News again. Last night, obviously Speaker Johnson was there at Madison Square Garden. Former President Trump looked at him and said two policy proposals, one on addressing immigration with mass deportation through the Alien Enemies Act. The other one was a proposal to ban flag burning. Your response to that, especially considering the latter would be a breach of free speech, which you've talked about before.
Well, I think that we can all recognize that there are important national symbols that are worth protecting, and I think the American flag is a national symbol that's worth protecting. Look, the censorship that I'm worried about is not somebody not being able to burn a flag at a protest rally, which, by the way, can sometimes be dangerous. It's not just burning a flag at an American protest rally. The censorship that I really worry about is when the federal government or when big technology companies tell the people in this hangar that they're not allowed to speak their mind according to their wishes. That is.
So JD is sort of getting off track. He says, well, we do need to protect national symbols like the flag with the criminalization that Donald Trump has proposed. But what I'm really worried about is mostly the stuff that left-wingers do. The crowd cheered it. The crowd cheered criminalizing flag burning. This is one of those crystal clear situations. Flag burning in the United States is protected under the First Amendment as a form of free speech, period, and there is not much else to say. This was reinforced in the landmark Supreme Court case Texas v. Johnson in 1989. That's it. Now, over the years, we've seen these proposals to amend the Constitution to ban flag desecration. They haven't been successful. Now, this is one of those things where my personal opinion and what is the law and what does the Constitution say might be two different things. I don't burn flags personally. I find people who burn flags rarely are helping make whatever point they're trying to make by burning flags. It's not that I go, oh, I'm offended. I'm offended about the flag burn. I'm not offended. I'm just kind of like, okay, I don't think it's a very interesting form of protest. That's my personal opinion. I wouldn't do it. But that doesn't matter. Flag burning in the United States is protected under the First Amendment as a form of free speech. The Supreme Court has affirmed this. Either J.P. Mandel cares about the Constitution and the rule of law, or he doesn't. And when he plays these games where he doesn't really answer the question, but he's certainly not contradicting Trump, well, I believe that there are certain symbols in this country that are worth protecting. Okay, so protect the flag you hang at your house, but you don't flush the Constitution and the decisions made by previous Supreme Court justices down the toilet. So not exactly coming through here as the champion of free speech, defender of the rule of law, and upholder of the Constitution that he claims himself to be, probably not coming as a huge surprise to most of the people in the audience. Kari Lake is about to lose her race for Senate in Arizona, and she still is unwilling to acknowledge that she lost her race for the governor in 2022. This is really good stuff. I want some of this injected directly into my veins. Kari Lake, with her extreme blur filter, now in addition to a blur filter during interviews, Kari Lake, I don't know what's going on. Why is her face yellow and her neck red? We just don't know. It's the strangest thing what she does with her camera. But what really disturbs me is not what she's doing with her Gaussian blur. It's what she's saying. Because she was asked by Caitlin Collins on CNN, really say, it's not a gotcha. Did you lose the 2020 election? And she says, oh, I'm going to look forward, not backwards.
Asking you about the turnout in 2022. Did you lose the 2022 election for governor?
Why are we looking backward? I'm looking forward, Caitlin.
Because
I already know what
you're
you're
concede that race.
Caitlin, I'm looking forward to what is coming up. I'm looking forward to November 5th and this huge election. And the people of our state are caring about what's coming up, what's going forward. How are we going to make sure we secure the border? What can we as Republicans do to make sure we bring back that thriving economy where we had record low
Notice that the question was, did you lose in 2022? She's talking about the border.
Unemployment.
So you're not going to say whether or not you lost the 2022 race. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know what, Caitlin? You've seen thousands of interviews from me. I've answered that a million times.
She hasn't.
Looking
You've
forward.
actually yet to answer the question directly on whether you believe that you did lose the election.
Well, I want to make sure our elections are run properly, and I'm still in litigation, so I don't want to speak to that, but I do want to look forward.
Any day, Kari Lake is going to be crowned the rightful governor of Arizona. We're all waiting for it. You know, I often say to myself, why can't she just give an answer and end the speculation and end getting asked every time? She could go, you know, Caitlin, I did lose. And in part because I lost, I'm in position today to become the next senator from Arizona. I wish that I had won that race, but what I could not have known at the time was that I would have an opportunity to represent Arizonans in a different way, and that's in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Senate. And so I'm focused on, right, you could, but what's the answer? Why can't she do it? Because as soon as they just go, I just did lose. If Trump just goes, I just lost. I'm going to try to win this time, but I just lost. They immediately undermine a ruse, a scam that they've run on their supporters for years now. raising money and hopes by saying, I'm the rightful winner, and here's what I'm going to do to try to get that back. You break the cult when the cult leader goes, I actually was not really telling you the truth. This was not a good interview for Kari Lake. It continued.
To your city, to my city, all across this country.
Do you think people care if you're willing to accept the results of an election that was free and fair and that you filed multiple lawsuits that have not gone anywhere? And I should note, a defamation lawsuit that was filed against you, you did not contest it from a top Arizona election official that says you lied about him repeatedly.
Well, I think what you meant to ask is Kari, things are really tough right now. And I know that people that are watching...
These are the questions I meant to ask with all due respect.
So Kari Lake tells Caitlin Collins what are the right questions to ask. Now let's talk about the polling. There is good news here. In Arizona polling, former David Pakman Show guest, current Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego is winning every single poll. Even in the right-leaning Trafalgar Group poll, he's up 4. Marist poll, he's up 8. A bunch of other polls, he's up between 4 and 9. In all likelihood, Kari Lake will be defeated once again. She was asked by Caitlin Collins, what about the fact that you're losing in the polls? And Lake just goes, oh no, I have my own polling and I'm winning all of it.
November 5th, we're seeing a huge turnout in voters here in Arizona, Democrats, Independents.
Can I ask you, in that race, when you look at the numbers in your state, Donald Trump is running ahead of Vice President Harris in that state. You're running behind Ruben Gallego by a few points, according to the numbers. We'll see if they bear out. Of course, it's polling. Yeah. But why do you think that is? Why do you think there are supporters who say that, voters that say they want to support Donald Trump, but also Ruben Gallego over you?
I don't really think those voters exist. I actually look at the good polling, our internal polling, which shows I'm ahead a little bit, and this is a tied-up race. So I'm actually looking forward to the election.
I'm winning, Caitlin. It doesn't matter what every single poll says. It's very obvious from the fact that she says she's winning now that she's getting set up to say, I won this one too. She should be she should be governor and senator. She should be given both roles because both elections will have been stolen from her. And then finally, Kari Lake trying to mirror Donald Trump in saying that it's a criminal dystopia in New York City. And Caitlin Collins is like, I'm on the subway all the time. It's fine.
On the changing your positions,
really quickly,
I question you on that because...
Caitlin, I was just in New York City. I believe that's where you are broadcasting live from tonight. The streets aren't safe anymore. The subways aren't safe anymore. I care about...
I take the subway all the time. It is safe. But I want to get back to focusing on...
The subway is fine. I mean, listen, I've said before, I do see people, on 14th Street, down underneath, you'll sometimes see people ranting and raving. They sound kind of like Trump. It's like what Trump does at a rally. There are people underneath the subway stairs, and sometimes you're like, that's a mental health problem. We have a problem here. But the subway is mostly fine, and Kari Lake just crowbarring. They love any opportunity to attack the major financial and tech centers of the country as just being absolutely terrible places because they're run by Democrats. And of course, Caitlin Collins goes, yeah, that's not really true. So Kari Lake lost in 2022, will almost certainly lose in 2024, and will be the most robbed woman. She'll be more robbed than how she thinks she'd be robbed if she lived in New York City, which she actually wouldn't. She will actually become the most robbed political candidate in history, having had a governorship stolen and a Senate seat stolen. It's going to be, November 6th is going to be a tough one for Kari Lake, my prediction. On the bonus show today, ballot drop boxes have been set on fire, or fire, as some of our friends from Buffalo say. They know who they are. Kamala Harris is seeing a surge with black male voters in the latest polls. Why? We have the answer. And it turns out Elon Musk worked illegally in the United States. Legal immigrants only. He was here, not authorized to work, worked illegally. This means Melania Trump once worked illegally in the United States, and Elon Musk worked illegally in the United States. Wow. Wow. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up for membership at joinpakman.com. Become a free subscriber to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. And please do pre-order my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine, at davidpakman.com/echo. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Upgrade your sleep with the award-winning Pod 4 Ultra by 8 Sleep, a smart mattress cover that fits easily over your existing mattress with adjustable temperature settings ranging from 55 to 110 degrees. You and your partner can each enjoy customized comfort on your own side of the bed. I keep mine at 60 to stay cool throughout the night. It even includes smart technology to adjust your mattress position, help reduce snoring. Plus, you'll have 30 days to see if it's the right fit for you. Visit 8sleep.com/Pacman and enter code Pacman for $350 off. The link is in the description.